Welcome to Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things, the podcast show. I'm your host, Carrie Roberts, and today I have another extraordinary guest, Scott Blumstein. Welcome, Scott. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Carrie.
So I want to start off, I was so excited because I realized that you and I are both from New Jersey, and I always get Jersey pride. I get very excited. So can you tell me a little bit about where you grew up in New Jersey, what you were kind of like as a young kid?
I'm originally from Morristown, New Jersey, which not Morristown, as I had to clarify most of the time because I used to get mail from them all the time. But yeah, it's up north, about 45 minutes outside of New York City, and you know, pretty normal town. It was pretty cool. Like it's actually very diversified in every way, which was kind of a cool upbringing and. I mean, I don't know, without getting too in depth. Yeah, it was pretty normal childhood and good area and
Did
yeah.
you play sports?
Yeah, I I love sports. Yeah, I mean, sports was a big part of my life. Watching them, playing in them, and I actually worked in like a sports card store in high school, which so that was a cool way to be around sports. So yeah, just always been a big passion of mine.
So before we kind of get into further on into your poker journey, I'm curious, when you were young, I mean, did you ever have talks about money with your family or friends? Were you fascinated by money? Were you into card games? Was any of that kind of in your vicinity growing up as a kid?
Truthfully, money was never important to me. Like it really like I don't know. I mean, it just wasn't like that kind of mindset or anything. Cards, I just kind of somehow found poker. I mean, I didn't have like maybe I wasn't like the best socially growing up, so it was just kind of something that I found that kept me busy um and I just kind of fell in love for it. I remember like playing with, uh, you know, a couple of the dads. Like it was be like five kids and their dads, and they kind of introduced me to poker and just just playing like little games like that, and then just slowly, gradually, just getting like obsessed with it. I guess is the word, and it just became the number one thing that I did, and that was it.
And what was it about poker that you got obsessed with? Was it the element of the actual playing of it? Was the people you played with? Was it the idea of winning or losing? What was it about the game that made you so fascinated by it?
It's funny. I really don't know the answer to that question. Like, I think about that sometimes too. I mean, I do love math, right? That was like always probably my favorite subject in school. So there was always an element of that to it. And I guess the money, like, so, you used to, as a kid, every poker fan watches like poker on TV, and it's like high stakes poker, and they're playing for like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, you get to see a guy bluff for $100,000. And I guess subconsciously that must have been appealing to me a little bit. Like just I think it was more just about the it was just a game I found that was accessible. I mean, it got really big in the early 2000s, and just it was just popular, and I don't know. Maybe it was because like I was a bigger kid growing up, and so sports, I knew sports weren't going to work out, so I had to find a way on the ESPN somehow, and I guess it was just poker. So
And I was reading that you went to college to, was it accounting that you studied? Is that
yeah,
correct, right?
yeah.
So you studied accounting, and then you had kind of said, okay, afterwards you were like, I like math, I'm good at math. Maybe I will get more into this poker thing. You know, was this something, when did you kind of realize like, okay, I'm actually pretty good at this? Like maybe I should take this further between just my friends that I'm playing with. How old were you? What was that moment like?
It was a while actually. I mean, I like got out of. I mean, I wasn't a great student, to be honest. Like I didn't. I guess I'm a pretty. I'm smart, I guess. I clearly kind of get things, but like when it came to like test taking, I was good. But when I got to college, I really got bad, and I didn't do school the way you're supposed to. And so I think when I got out of school with an accounting degree, I I don't know. I mean, just pure laziness. I wasn't gonna be an accountant. I didn't I didn't have internships. I didn't even know where to start, So I just, thankfully, poker was a passion. And like I was telling you that we would rent this house in Brigantine, me and like two
Hmm.
other buddies, right, in the winter. And it would be like $1,400 a month for like a 3-bedroom beach house. And it was always kind of a cheat code because I could do that for, 7 months and then maybe spend the summer in Vegas or at home for the rest of the time. And just paying my bills, getting by 21, 22, 23. And then when I was 23, that was when you kind of hit that turning point where you're like, well, where's this going to go? Right. Like we're not,
Hmm.
now what? I probably have to do something more serious. And then I kind of, it just hit me one day that I needed to probably try a little harder and maybe understand. I would almost call it an epiphany. Like that's a crazy way of putting it, but from that point on, it just kind of started to shape itself, and I started to just figure it out more. And so it was like 3 years before I really got to the point where I thought I could be an actual successful player, making real money. Um, but it wasn't like I wasn't like a prodigy or anything. So
I told you I've never played poker myself, and I really don't know anything about the sport. And I did not even know, which until I read more about you, that there is a World Series of poker. I mean, how do you get involved in that? Is this similar to other sports where there is someone scouting you? Is somebody watching you? Do you have to go to like local tournaments? How does this kind of work to kind of build your way up so that you're considered a real professional player?
well, that's the thing about poker. You don't. None of that. I mean, it really is just if you have the money to play, you can play, and that's what's so like unique about it. I mean, it's the only thing that you can really do that in, where you can play against the best in the world, and not only play against them but beat them on any given day. So that's what's so appealing to it to a lot of people. I mean, the World Series of Poker, the tournament that I won, gets like 7,200 people, all putting up $10,000. So that's a lot, and it's just it's a mix of so many different people. You got doctors, lawyers, actors, professional athletes, and then you got professional poker players, and then so it really is a thing that anyone can participate in and anyone can take their shot at. So it's definitely cool in that regard.
Do you think actually it's similar to like the video game world? Do you think there's similarities in
No,
this
that's
sense?
way
No,
more
you think.
skill. That's way more skill. That's what I'm saying. That no, you actually have to be elite at that to win any sort of world championship. I'll tell you that much. So no, it's not. It's really like nothing. I mean, it's like it's a skill lottery. It's the perfect game because there's just enough luck that it is not like that, right? But there's certainly a skill element. There's certainly people that are better than others, and I think a lot of people misappropriate because you gotta know all the stuff to do all the intricacies, and there's a lot to know, but a lot of comes down to execution and staying in the moment and decision making, right? It's more decision making because once you make the decision, everything else kind of plays itself out. There's no physical thing you have to do. So, it's more. I compare it more to like stock trading, like
Hmm.
um, I think that's the best comparison is something like that, where it's just risk analysis and knowing when to do what and having a little bit of luck, like we talked about. So
So when you're playing a game, especially when the stakes are higher, how do you, I would assume there's some sort of mindset training or something that you do to get your mindset right. Because like you said, you have to be somewhat risk adverse. You have to decide, okay, I'm making this decision. I don't necessarily know what everybody else has, but I'm going to assume, and based on where I'm at, is there anything that you're doing before a game, during a game, from a mindset perspective?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely need to be in a good mindset to be successful at poker. That there's no doubt about that. And I didn't do a lot of that beforehand. I mean, I attributed that run in that tournament to somehow I kind of did it myself. I was, I guess like that was like the, I guess you could call it like determination. Maybe I just went out and like it was cool because it was like one of those things where I wasn't going to be afraid, right? Like you can't be, you shouldn't be afraid of losing. So even though $10,000 is a lot of money, it's the first time I've ever done anything of that buy-in or anything. Like I didn't know if it was going to work, but I was going to trust my gut and trust um my game plan, and I was just going to just do whatever I thought was right, no matter how crazy it might sound. So somehow I was able to be in the mindset to do that. And then once I got to the final table, that's when like, now the jumps are crazy and there's, now it's on national TV and it's a little bit more overwhelming. So at that point, that's when I brought in a mindset coach to really kind of, work with me and get me more prepared. And that was a huge decision. So, yeah, I think it's advantageous to have some kind of mindset training or to just be in a clear head whenever you play because it's decision making. So that's your brain, and your brain needs to be working at its best.
Do you find when you were playing or are playing that you do get so focused just on what you're doing, or how much is involved in really watching the faces, the movements, the tiny elements of someone else to understand if they're doing well or not?
It's both. I mean, that's like the age old argument. There's a lot of it is math based. A lot of it is just decisions based on statistics and data and math. But there is some kind of human element, especially when you play in person, that I certainly believe is true, and it can be like the difference maker sometimes. Like maybe it like sways you one way or another based off of what you were going to do otherwise. And but yeah, you can definitely, I definitely believe that you can feel body, even energy and stuff at times. And there's definitely been pivotal moments where I've relied on that, and it works. So there's a lot of people out there that want to say it doesn't, but I think at the end of the day, it's all just another part of the game and another element. And if you choose to use it, it can definitely come to your advantage, in my opinion.
And so we were talking about, that you were at the Worlds for Poker, the World Series for Poker. In 2017, you won. And as you were, first of all, when you got that event, like you said, before you're kind of playing, you're getting better, you're playing with bigger stakes with better people, but now it's being televised. These are some of the best in the world. How are you feeling kind of before and during? I mean, you had done this mindset training. You've been doing this for a while. Did you know the people that were at the table? Had you played them before? What was kind of the experience like?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing I did in regards to any of that was I just stayed in the moment. Like I didn't even let myself realize what was happening while it was happening. And that is like, I guess, easier said than done, but like yeah, it's still like kind of a blur because I did such a good job of that. Like I don't remember thinking anything about, I didn't allow myself to be like, what's going on? Like I just was focused, right? Determined and focused, and those two words are like are 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 scary when it comes to that. So, I mean, I knew a couple of the guys actually because I had seen them play on TV years before. I mean, two of the guys that were at my final table had already made a final table of this exact tournament in previous years, so they were already experienced and they had notoriety. So a lot of the other people at my table had a lot more experience than me, but yeah, I just did a good job of not letting it bother me, not having it not matter somehow.
That I think that's a really hard thing to do. So either I think it's a combination again of you being able to do that, but the coach that maybe you worked with to really help you get there. And so at the end, when you won, I have this question somebody asked me. They wanted to know what was your winning hand that made you win.
So I had an ace and a two, and I went all in before the flop, and I got called by my opponent who had an ace and an eight. So he had a better hand than me. So at the time, I still had more chips, right? So I had about, I think it was like 260 million to his 80 million or whatever. So I still had more. If I lost this hand, I still would have been in it. I still probably, hopefully, would have won. But I was very tired at this point because the tournament is like 7 days. I mean, I played 10 days of poker in 12 actual days, like 12-hour days a day, in high stress situations. So yeah, it's a lot, and I was like fatigued at this point. So I really wanted it over, and I needed to hit a two in order to beat him. So the flop is the first three cards. They come, and there's nothing. The turn, nothing. So on the river, I need only a two and a two, and that's it, just a two. And most of the time, a two is the most inconsequential card in the deck. So 7% of the time it comes and I win, and the other 93% I got to go play more poker. And somehow there it was. The two of hearts came out on the board, and I won, and all hell broke loose. So
And what was the amount that you won for that game?
$8.15 million. So
So what was the feelings and emotions in that moment for you?
yeah, you know, shock, like extreme shock, just because it was so unexpected, and then um yeah, it's still again tough to kind of talk about. I like it was cool because I had my friends and my family were all there, so it was like nice to get to share that with them. I had investors, people who invested in me before the tournament, who were a couple of them were really good friends who I got to write some checks for. So uh, yeah, just shock, and obviously some excitement, and yeah, and just shock. I think is what I keep coming back to.
One of the things that I have found pretty common for anyone that has done a high level thing like yourself, I've interviewed someone who's, been competitive athletes, and then it was over, or they did this tremendous trip and then it was over. And a lot of them talk about this feeling of relief, of they had been going at it so hard that there was an element of like, oh, I can relax. And then there were some people that said, I actually felt sad because it was like, what do I have to look to next? I've conquered this. What's next for me? Did you feel any of those feelings at all?
Maybe a little bit. I mean, the whole thing happened so fast too. That's what makes it so different too. It's like when I talk about athletes or like anyone, right? Like anyone who really um, succeeds in anything, like it takes time. You kind of gradually see it coming, and so like this was in like a 2 week span. I had a moderate amount of success. I had won $200,000 the year before down in Atlantic City, so that was like my first big score, and that was great and all, but it still wasn't like it didn't come with what this came with. But this was like in 2 weeks, then everything changed, and like so I think within when it uh comes down to that, like it was more just a feeling of excitement because it opens up other doors. I like that's what I said, like poker, like the funny thing about poker is some people will like go on Twitter and they'll like retire, right? They'll be like, "Oh, I'm retiring from poker," and people are like, "We don't care. Like, what does retiring even mean? Like, there's no retiring. You can play if you want. You can not be a professional. You can make money doing something else. So it's like one of those things where, I don't like. I'm not a professional anymore, which I think is the best part of coming out of it, is that I don't feel the need to play poker to make money,
Mm-hmm.
and it allows me then to figure out what it is I want to do with my life, which I've been saying for 3 or 4 years now, so I should probably figure it out soon. Um, but yeah, that's the good news about it.
So I think the other thing too, we hear when people win a lot of money very quickly, it can change their life, like you said. So we even talk about people who win the lottery or in a huge element in poker. Do you feel like winning that changed your life or changed who you were at all? And if so, how?
It definitely changed my life. Um, just because it opened up new doors that weren't there before, and but I mean, I like to think it didn't change who I was. You might have to talk to the people that knew me before to answer that more than me, but I don't think it did. I mean, I still try to be the same person. I mean, you know, and it's like I don't know. I mean, I'm not, you know, like I said, after taxes and the, you know, it's a pieces, like you know, I don't have $8 million is the other thing, right? I'm not like, and even if I did, I don't know. The whole thing's so complex. Like money shouldn't really change you too much. If anything, like it's nice because I like, in theory, I feel closer to helping people and making, you know, maybe the world a better place kind of thing than I was before. So that's kind of how I choose to look at it. And you know, obviously, it's nice being comfortable. And there's so many people struggling, right? That's the thing. It's like, um, and you know that's always tough. But you know, I don't think it changed me.
You know, I saw on your Instagram, I think it was one the day you won. There's a picture of you and your mom, and you talked about her being cancer survivor and the support that she gave you. When you were kind of doing this poker thing, especially early on, like you said, you're doing it for a few months, you're living out of it towards Atlantic City and whatever. Was anyone like, okay, Scott, like you need to do something, you should get this job, you should do that? Or was people like your mom or other people very supportive of like, no, you're doing great, like do what you feel comfortable with?
Yeah. So that's actually that's probably the most funny story about my whole journey. I like to tell even is so I had that epiphany and then started to kind of feel like I was figuring out for the first time, like actually serious about it, and still wasn't doing too great. And I had my bags packed in the kitchen to head down to Atlantic City to play a tournament. And that was, you know, my dad was in the kitchen. He was like, listen, like, I think, you know, it's been a while. Like, you should probably get a job. Like he had that talk with me after you know a couple years of not, and I was like, you know what, I actually like kind of agree with you. I do. I don't know what I'll do. Like you know, I guess I probably should have gone and worked at Target or something just to do something. I don't know. I don't know what it would have been, but I was like, you know what, I kind of agree, but I also know that I'm on the right track, right? So like, you know, maybe give me a little bit more time and then we could talk about it soon. But, you know, I kind of agree with you. So I got in the car, went down to Atlantic City, and that was the very next tournament was when I won that $200,000. So yeah, again, like it always seemed poker always seemed when I was always at the bottom or at the end, it looked like the end. That was when I always had a big come up. It's crazy. It really happened 3 or 4 times in my life. So I don't know what it is. I don't. I guess that's just. I feel like it's more just a product of like that. Just might be my personality trait. Is like I'm like as lazy as can be, and then when I need to, I just do it.
You get
So
focused, yeah.
yeah, you know, it's like oh, you know, now I got no choice. So
Well, and I think a lot of people, you know, especially in the last year or so, as we're recording this, you know, that's a very common feeling. You either can sit and nothing's going to happen, or if you have nothing happening, you might as well just try anything, which seems a similar attitude for you. You know, as you were kind of doing all this stuff, and you said even now, was there a moment when you're like, okay, I did the poker thing, I still play, but I don't want to do it professionally in the way that I did? Was there a thought of like, okay, maybe I want to teach other people, or I want to help other people, or I want to start a business or invest? Like, did you have any of those thoughts or anything that you've maybe in the last few years have kind of tried and tested to see if that's kind of the next piece of your journey?
yeah, I've done a little bit of all those things already. I guess you could say um yeah, I want to, but again, like that's why you know, you look at the title of your show, right? Ordinary people doing. I'm still, you know, an ordinary person who struggles to do that. You know, who struggles to make these steps. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I have a lot of personal growth that I have needed to do. I mean, when I won the tournament, I was, you know, 305 pounds. So that was like priority one was taking care of that and So I lost like 80 pounds, and
which is amazing.
yeah, and that was, that for a while that was just like nothing else mattered besides doing that. And but I can only rest on that laurel for so long, and I think like I've extended that period maybe a year or two past that, and so and then a pandemic happened, which like is obviously tough for everyone. And so you know again, I feel so fortunate that I am allowed to make excuses, and it's like probably okay, because that's kind of like the privilege I have. But I do think that I'm getting closer, and I do think soon enough I am optimistic that I will have started a company or done something that I've set out to do. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I think I always it's so funny because I'm in my 30s and I always tell young people, meaning like high school, college kids, that the big myth of adulthood is that you should know what you want to do, what you're doing, where you're going. There's all these pressure on 18 to 22-year-old kids, and I'm like, the big lie or myth is that no adult has it figured out.
Yep.
And there are moments that we do and moments that we don't, and that changes, and that's so common amongst everybody. And I think especially like we said during this time, people having lost their job or going through, family loss and things of that nature, everybody's had to reevaluate and retry and do different things than maybe they did a year ago. So I think that's a very common feeling. And like you said, it's just kind of like it'll come. You know what I mean? You try different things, you see what happens, and
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing for me too, is that when because it happened at the age of 25, right? Like that timeline wise, yeah, like nobody was there to really help me and be like, hey, listen, like you're 25, like you're not, I don't know, like now I'm 29 and I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe I haven't started that business yet, but like you said, I feel like a lot of 29-year-olds haven't done that yet. So like I'm trying to give myself time to like realize that, okay, if I do like figure it out by 31, maybe 32, like that's not even that late, like so that's what I've tried to like, it's trying to find that balance of like it's an excuse, but it's also kind of fair too. So I
yeah,
I think we're hitting that age now where it's becoming a little bit of an excuse. So but guys like Gary V, I'm sure as a Jersey
yep.
guy,
Yeah, he went
Gary
to
V.
my high school, side
Wow,
note, which
there
is
you
weird
go.
because nobody knows our high school. So,
What high school is that?
North Hunterdon
Oh
in New
yeah, there you
Jersey.
go. There you go.
Yeah.
So yeah. So but he preaches all the time. He didn't start the intermediate till he was 34, right? So it's like I do believe in that. I do subscribe in that. So we'll see how it plays out. Right now, I'm just trying to get through the pandemic mentally,
As many
and
people are.
as everyone is, yeah. So whatever. If it puts things
Yeah,
on pause, and um,
it's true. And you know what? What I find actually when I talk to people that are 65 plus, it's always interesting because when you talk to them, the things that sometimes we worry about in younger years, like they're like, oh my God, don't even worry about it. Like you hear all the stuff they've been through and the multiple careers and sometimes multiple marriages and children and all these different things. You're like, wow, there's still so many things that can happen, could happen, will happen. And sometimes feeling this anxiety over it is really not of use to us, right? So it's sometimes comforting and inspiring when you talk to people 65 to 80, 90 years old and the things that they've learned and the things that they've done. And I know that that's been a huge thing for me that's been really helpful and puts things in perspective. So I appreciate you sharing that because I think that's pretty common for many people, especially now. Do you have any, from a poker standpoint, do you have anybody that's playing poker that says, oh, I want to get better, I'm just not winning? Like, do you have any advice for them to just get better at the game?
um, I mean, there's so much information out there now. I mean, that's the other thing about poker. Like it is just rapidly growing, and there's so much content now with you know websites and TV and stuff. So there's definitely some there's so many different outlets you can choose from. The best way to get better at anything though, and I think you already know this, is just a personal coach. Just like someone you trust and think is going to give you the good information, and just a lot of it coming up was like peer-to-peer stuff. Like you just had a group of buddies who hopefully got everyone would get information from all over, and then you would piece it together. And so that was like fun coming up, like doing it a little bit on your own, but knowing that the only way to get better is to just find out what getting better means. And it's so hard. I don't like poker coaching because there's so much intangibles to it. There's so, like, first of all, I think there's like, and I can say that because I was myself. Like, I don't, like, I had to have an awakening, right? And if I didn't have that awakening, it might not have ever changed. So I don't, how do you tell someone, well, that's what you need, is to like realize that you don't know what you're doing, and that, you need to start seeing the things differently. So, and there's, because of the variance and the luck involved, there's like, the difference between getting 12th and first is so thin sometimes. It's one hand that, like, I don't know what to tell you, like I don't know. There's no absolutes, where in like other sports it's a little bit more clear cut. So I stay away from poker coaching. I mean, the best way to get better, yeah, watch. All I know is what I did, right? I watched as many hours as I could on TV at the beginning. I Googled terms that I heard and wanted to know more about. And then I just talked to people that were trying to figure it out too.
Well, and I think, like you said in the beginning too, mindset is such a huge piece of it. Whether you're playing or if you've had a lot of bad games, you have to be able to get over that and say this is a different experience. And so I think you kind of talking about that at the beginning is also equally as important. The other thing you kind of lightly mentioned, which is a big deal, is that you lost 80 pounds. I think, losing 10 pounds is hard. Losing 80, losing 100, that's huge. When you were kind of going through that, obviously you said, okay, this is my focus now, this is what I'm dedicating to. Was your mindset different for that? Was there something that you did differently, or was it like I hired a coach, a chef, everything, you know what I mean, to help you? What kind of helped you along that journey?
Yeah, so I mean, even right before I played the main event, that's the other thing. So I was like 330 at my peak. That was in like April or March of 2017, and that was like, so poker. I had won that money the summer before, so I had a little bit of validation in poker. I was still getting better slowly but surely, but that was when I like first really put some damage on weight loss for the first time in my life. I went from like 330 to 305, right? So 25 pounds doesn't seem like a lot. I still was morbidly obese, but like the point was that I think that was enough to, like, I don't think I win that poker tournament if I don't even lose that 25, right? So it ended up being significant. Um, and then once I won, well, then the question became, well, let's say I'd gone out and I didn't win. Let's say I didn't even make the money. Let's say I cashed for a little bit, made $20,000, right? Like, because my situation at the time wasn't perfect, would I have come home and continued to do the weight loss despite that, right? If I still had to grind, if I still wasn't financially secure. And I'll never know the answer to that, but I like to think that I would have. And then, obviously once I won, well, then I guess, which is tough. Like, I don't want it to be that way. I don't want people like who didn't win the main event to be like, well, I can't lose the weight, because I don't think that's true. But, I do think it became, there was just more motivation, right? Again, mindset. Like, I just was like, okay, well, now I see the light at the end of the tunnel, maybe a little bit more clear. So now I need to get healthy for, a couple of reasons. So, um, there was no secret formula. I just kind of, I got a new routine. I think routine is really important. I was going to the gym, twice a day. I think lifting weights is really important. I think all those things, and it's much easier said than done. And um, because it is such a mental health issue, right? It is such a mindset issue that they do just correlate so much between each other that, I guess it became easier when I when things became easier, you know? So,
Yeah, and I like, like you said, the title of this is Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things. I think, the things you talk about are things a lot of people go through and have issues with. And sometimes there's a comfort in knowing, like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only person that
yeah.
feels this or think of this.
So I'm actually, that's the one thing I think it's coming out next week. Um, I guess this is holding myself accountable, but I think I recorded a podcast with a buddy of mine about this very subject. Um, so we'll see. I think it's going to be released soon. We'll see.
About
So
what specifically?
yeah, just about, wait, like, because like you said, everyone
Hmm.
can relate to it, I guess. I mean, I feel so reserved talking about it, like for my own insecurities or whatever reason, but I guess like that's why everyone does, and that's why there's not much content about it out there. So I will see. I mean, I guess that would make sense for me to just get into that field, right? Like talk about helping people. Well, like it's like, what better way, right? So
Yeah, I think anytime somebody, you talked about a coach. I think, there are a lot of people that label themselves as a life coach and they just want that title, but they don't have any experience. And then they just start charging an insane amount. And so I do ask people to be wary of that. A good coach
yeah,
is somebody who's done it, who's been where you were, who's gone through it and exceeded and now knows how to teach it. And
yeah,
so if you have somebody who has come to you and says, I'm 300 pounds, and you're like, look, so was I. And I've lost this amount and now I'm excited about it and I want to teach it. Like that's a value. And sometimes that's more important to someone than someone who's never had a weight issue. So
right.
it makes, it does make a big difference. And I'm excited for you that you'll be sharing more of that. And I think when we're vulnerable and we start kind of sharing our stories, it creates more connection. Do you have any other thoughts or advice for people that are watching or listening, not necessarily related to poker, but I think just about, mindset and making decisions? Because I think the big takeaway I have from you today is just, you really just, even if you're maybe scared, you're like, I'm making a decision and I'm doing this, whether it's
Right.
at the poker table or it's I'm doing weight loss or whatever. Do you have any maybe thoughts or advice to share based on that for people listening?
Yeah, I mean, I I think the best advice is to, I mean, it's tough. It's tough for me because, like I said, I'm kind of a hypocrite about it sometimes too. But the best advice is to just get help. I mean, it really is that simple. Like I think the issue is that I think the struggle is that the paradox that most people struggle to be open about this stuff, right? It's hard to do it. I don't care who you are, it's hard to do it. So it's this crossroads of like you wanting someone else to help you. It's hard for you to get the help because you might not even want to feel better, right? Like you might not even like, there's so much to it, and I think like again, Corona has amplified everything to a massive degree, and so I think this period of time, like I think it's okay to not be okay, probably, but I think yeah, I think with anything, I think like just biting the bullet and just like being like susceptible to help is the best thing you can do.
I love that and I agree. There are people that want to help you. And so I think I always tell people there's most likely someone who's been through what you've been through or they're going through it too. So there are people that can help and I love that you're sharing that. If people want to connect with you or follow you online, where's the best place to do that?
So yeah, Twitter and Instagram are the same. It's at sblum 2711. Um, and yeah, those are the two best ways for sure. My DMs are open, and yeah, we'll see. I guess I'm excited. I should be more excited about doing something like this because I do want to do it, but uh, you know, so sometimes you just gotta pull the trigger. I can bluff. I can do a bluff for $5 million, but I can't put out a podcast. It's
Well, we're glad you're here
for
today. It's
sure.
the first step. And the last question I like to ask all of my guests, Scott, is what is one word or quote or mantra that you try to live by every single day?
So yeah, Jackie Robinson. I was in Los Angeles playing poker, and the Rose Bowl is out there, and we drove past Pasadena. I don't know. I said for some reason I was like, let's go check out the Rose Bowl. So we pull up. It's an old decrepit stadium that you can't get really close to, but it was cool, I guess. But then at the corner of my eye, I saw a statue about like 50 feet away. So we went over, walked over the statue, and it was an old school football player running, and and I was like, who is this? And we looked, and it was Jackie Robinson. Everyone knows him as a baseball player, obviously, but in college he was a three-sport letterman. He was track and field, baseball, and football, and they had a statue for him there. And there's a quote that has kind of been the thing that I live by, and it's a life is only as important as the impact it has on other lives. Jackie Robinson. So
That's
that's it.
perfect. I love it. Well, I thank you so much, Scott, for sharing your story, your journey, and I'm excited for you on your next step of your journey. I think we're starting to hear that breakthrough, and I'm excited to
We'll
hear
see.
more. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Carrie.